All right. 10 students on the first day the club met. She asked the members how many movies they streamed last year. The 10 students reported the numbers. Find the variance and the standard deviation. So I kind of want to talk you through the steps. I want to make a list of what the steps are, as well as the kind of just find the process of what we're doing here, right? Okay, so we're going to list all of these. If we find that sum, we find if we add all of that up, we get 230. And the first step in what we do here is that we find the mean for that set of data. So if we find our mean, if we add all of those values up and divide by however many there are, and there are 10, then we find that the mean or the average is 23. Okay? So then the next step is that we're basically finding these differences or these deviations, right? So to find our deviations, we are doing each of those particular values minus our mean, right? So in other words, 32 minus 23, so we get 9. 18 minus 23, so negative 5. 15 minus 23, so negative 8, and so on. And I was going to make a list of steps here. Okay, the next step is that we square those deviations. We do this because we want the value to be positive. We're talking about a distance, so we want the value to be positive. So regardless of whether the answer was positive or negative, when we found our deviation, we want to square those numbers so that we have a positive distance ultimately, okay? So we're going to square the deviations. I'm just going to put a little, I'm not going to write out what we're doing there, but you guys can see. So this is 81, 64, 16, 1, 196, 324, 49, and 9. So the next step there is that we add all of those squared values up. We find that sum. And so in this particular case, if we add all of that up, we get that this sum here is 766. And last semester we divided by n minus 1. This semester we're only going to divide by n. Oops. We know what n is. Sorry. I wanted to put that over here. All right, so we are dividing by 10 because there are 10 values. So that means that our variance is equal to 76.6. And then when we take the square root of 76.6, we get that the standard deviation is 8.75. And in this case, the context was this was movies. Okay. So guys, some of you already know this, but for others of you, I want you to think about this. Standard deviation, right? We're talking about the standard difference of what all of these values would be to the mean. So we're more or less, it's kind of like taking an average, right? So a standard deviation, another way of thinking about that, using kind of some other verbiage, it would be, it's what's the typical or the average variation or difference for all of these values. Okay, all right, let's see. Is it possible to have a standard deviation of 0? Yeah, if every value were the same, which is a pretty boring set of data, but exactly right, Braden. If every value in the data set were the same, then we'd have a standard deviation of 0. We cannot ever have a standard deviation that's negative. It's either going to be 0, which is that really boring set of data, or it can be positive. So just keep that in mind. Okay? All right. Some other things I want to kind of share with you, and that is the different values here. Okay, so if we are talking about kind of some of the different properties of data sets, I want to kind of share some information and have you think about what will be affected if it's changed by a shift or a rescale, that type of thing. So I want to talk about that as well. Okay, so if we are looking at check over here in the tray, middle or bottom, I'm not sure which, sweetie. There should be a notes packet there somewhere. Yeah, okay. All right, when we are talking about a shift, we're talking about basically adding or subtracting a number to each other number, right? We're not gonna do much with this, but I do want you to kind of be familiar with this idea. So we'll kind of talk about this, but then we're gonna move on and actually work on stuff with the calculator, okay? And then hopefully get to workbook and then to the Excel stuff, hopefully. If we are given a set of data, we can think about what the minimum value and the maximum value is. If we add or subtract the same value to each number in a set, then obviously our minimum and our maximum values are going to change as well. So min and max is going to be adjusted by is going to change if we have a shift. Our mean would also get adjusted, as would our median. The range is not going to change, right? Basically, the difference in our high and our low, that wouldn't change regardless of whether we added or subtracted a number to that. And then similarly, our standard deviation would not change either, okay? Whereas if we are rescaling, like if we take all of these numbers and we have them or we double them, that type of thing, then I want you to think about the fact that everything would get affected there. The min and maximum values would, what our mean would be, what our median would be, and then what our range and standard deviation is, okay? All right, grab your graphing calculators. We're gonna kind of talk through, I'm gonna refresh your memory for some, and for some of you, you may not have ever done this, so I want you to make sure you can see where you can find the information on your calculators. Okay, so you enter the data. So start a new document, and when you enter your data, you are putting it under lists and spreadsheets. And I meant to pull this up and I forgot on my here. Is this gonna cooperate? Julie. Right. We're gonna close that up. I need you to try this for me, and then you can make sure you guys know. Did you help them with finding? Okay, let's go ahead and enter that data. Down at the bottom. So the 115, 150 and all of that. Actually, let's give it a name. What should we name it? ELECTRIC, electric is what I'm gonna use. Okay, guys, you have to holler when you have questions on stuff, okay? Especially, many of you, you just need a refresher on this, but others of you have not ever done this, so you've got to speak up and say, what are we doing here? Okay? Okay, we enter that data, so in lists and spreadsheets, then remember we want to add another page. So remember we do Control Doc to add another page, and we want to add a calculator page. Add calc page. So Control Doc. And then where do we go from here, guys? Do you remember? Menu. Do you remember?
Go menu.
Yep, good. Menu, statistics.
Stat calculations.
Stat calculations.
And then one variable.
And then one variable statistics. Good. Stat calculations, come on. Uh-oh, I always do that. I click too hard and I get to the wrong thing. And then number of lists is just one, that's fine. Click here if you need to, whatever, it'll show you what your lists, possible lists are, and then okay. Menu statistics, stat calculation, one variable statistics.
And stat calculations. Wait, what is
Okay.
the range again?
So
on the calculator.
it's not gonna show you the range.
The mode, sorry, the mode.
Oh, it's not gonna show you the mode either. You're gonna have to be able to look at the data. It doesn't, that's not on here. Good question, though. Yeah, so remember to name your set on your calculator. All right, there are 10 values there, so let's keep that. You find that the mode is 90. Because that's repeated. There's no other repeats. Find when we are looking at stuff. So it said, find the mean, median, mode, range, and standard deviation. So we'll have to look at the data. I'll pull the data up so you're not having to flip back and forth between the two. But remember, on the calculator page, if you scroll up to the very top, that gives you your mean. That's your X bar. And then, we're going to use the sigma x, if you notice, okay? All right, so mean is 112.80. Our median is that 112.50. That's down below, like you have to kind of scroll. I'm going to put this up here, just for space-wise. Our mode, you actually have to just look at the data. So if you go back and look at the data set, so the mode is 90. So that is one you have to be able to look at the data set for. Riley, that one's not going to be on there. God bless you. And then your range, we're looking at our high minus our low. So 150 minus, what was the low, 88? is $62. And for standard deviation, I gotta scroll back up. For standard deviation, we're gonna use the sigma sub x. And that is 21.37. Okay, so this is kind of an example of what we were doing in that table that I wanted you to think about, okay? And that's all, this is all we're really gonna talk about. I mostly wanted to focus our attention on remembering how to plug into the calculator and learning for those of you who haven't done it. But I do want you to kind of see how this works too. So if each electric bill increases by $10, what happens to the values above? So let's think about what those values would be. So this would be 122.80. This would be 122.50. This would be 100. The range would not change. It would be the same. And the standard deviation is also the same. If each bill doubles, then everything changes. 225.60, 225. I'm not being very consistent with my dollar signs. 180, 124. And then this ends up being 42.74. Okay. That's it. So the main focus was making sure you understand how to plug into the calculator, and then what kind of changes or shifts if we do these shifts, if we're adding or subtracting something to it, if we are doubling it, okay? I want to look at some stuff in the workbook. If you notice, I've got that marked here. So if you want to grab your workbooks, I want to try a couple problems with that, just to make sure you're good. And then I'm hoping we can get to the Excel, although I don't know. We'll have to see.